Hello and welcome to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic, and today we'll be talking about episode 34, Trading Cards. Grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in. Episode summary, we open with Sarah in disguise with Wama. They are attempting to scam a Damien into trading for a song of Mandalore music for a can opener. The Damien takes the trade, but before Sarah can scan the music, another Damien steals it. Back at the port court, we see a player called Tartarecker beat Aggro 999. And then Sarah's friend calls and tells her that she found a player who's willing to trade for a stone pillar scan for the Song of Mandalore music. And so Sarah crafts a domino effect plan involving all of her friends in order to get a stone pillar scan to make the trade for the Song of Mandalore music. Peyton is tasked with finding a Mempedian cactus to trade for a Drachnus card to replace Kaz, who is going to trade his Drachnus card in the real world for a Bareth Beyond card. Then we find out we also need a Ribian scan to help replace Kaz's Drachnus. So Agro999 says he is willing to give up his Ribian scan if Tom can beat Tartarecker in every single battle of a match, and so Tom is tasked with defeating Tartarecker. All of these cards will come together to trade for the Stone Pillar scan, to trade for the Song of Mandalore music, and that is the plan. So they all go to complete their tasks, but Kaz encounters complications because the guy lost the card, and so now they have to look for it. Peyton has to search for this cactus in the hot sun, and Tom challenges Tartarecker to a match, and Tartarecker uses Tartarecker for every single battle in the match. In the end, Kaz makes the trade, Tom wins the match and gets the card, and Peyton finds a cactus. So they all go back to Sarah with their success stories, but she brushes them off because she ported to Param and Wama caught the music thief, so she was able to scan the Song of Mandalore music without having to go through with the complicated plan. And that's the episode. So, analysis. Let's talk about Sarah. This episode opens with Sarah on another scan quest. Classic Sarah. And so you would think that this would be a Sarah-focused episode because the central conflict revolves around her desire to scan the Song of Mandalore music, and the cold open revolves around her trying to make the deal in order to get this music. But she completes her goal off screen, and so that leads me to believe that this isn't actually a Sarah-focused episode. It gives us more insight on the boys, if anything, more than it does Sarah. And because this episode shows Tom, Kaz, and Peyton's dedication to their friendship, it shows their loyalty and how that is something that they value. They all sacrifice in order to help their friend, and this episode doesn't exactly paint Sarah in a good light because she pressures her friends into helping her and then uses them and then doesn't communicate when her plan to independently complete the goal occurs, and so she leaves her friends high and dry. And she doesn't tell her friends when she gets the music scan, and so she makes these boys sacrifice for nothing. And at the end of the episode, when the boys are upset, they're like, I hope she loses that match. We're not upset with them because it's reactionary to Sarah use them and then brushes them off, and obviously they're upset. And we don't take that as a negative on their character because they're wishing her ill will. We view it as a reactionary response to these events that just took place. And so, all in all, is this a Sarah-focused episode? I kind of think not, like the opening is, but then that leads us into the exciting incident of Sarah wasn't able to get that Song of Mandalore music scan, and so thus hilarity ensues. I don't know if this episode is focused on one character. It's Sarah focused in the way of her actions push the plot, but we don't learn more about her character or about how she interacts with the world so much as we get to learn about the boys' dedications to their friendships. They're willing to do a lot for Sarah because she's their friend and they want her to succeed as much as they want themselves to succeed. And isn't that friendship? Now, one thing about this plan is it is kind of messy and convoluted, but all in all, they end up at a net zero. Tom wins the Rivian, and Peyton gets the cactus, which means they have the means necessary to trade for a Drachness card, and Kaz traded his Drachness card away. And so, if anything, Kaz just got a Bareth Beyond card because they have the resources in order to replace the Drachness card. And so, Tom got something, Peyton got something. Now we're going to trade those away. They both get a net zero to get this Drachness card, and the Drachness replaces the Drachness that Kaz lost. So, all in all, they do end up plus one Bareth Beyond card, but for all of his time and energy, and honestly money, like Kaz paid for a movie ticket and then wasn't able to see the movie. And so for all of this effort they went through was really just to get a Bareth Beyond scan, and who's keeping that? Probably Kaz. He's the underworld guy. But Sarah got her card through going back to Param and scanning it, and so the plan, it is a net zero plus a Bareth Beyond card. Like, that's really what happens in this episode. Now, one thing about this episode is they do kind of explore a new visual medium to help us explain the plan. We get this kind of doodle style, like it's very sketchy, it's black and white 2D animation, and they use it to explain the plan. And so I think, one, this visual aid was actually extremely helpful in explaining the complexity of the plan, especially since they had the characters in doodles and they had the cards themselves in addition. So it very clearly showed the the process of acquiring the cards, trading the cards again, to ultimately end up with this Song of Mandalore music. And I think it explains it very well. And then two, this doodle style, let's talk about why did they choose this doodle style? And why, like, this 2D animation, what about it supports the narrative that they're trying to convey? And so I think, one, changing the visual medium helps to emphasize the hypothetical nature of the plan. Like, they are planning for the future. So the visual storytelling that they're telling isn't reality, and so differentiating from the normal animation style is a good choice because it differentiates this isn't what's actually happening, this is, one potential future. And then the style itself, why choose a sketchy style instead of, 3D animation or, something more expressive? But I think this sketchy animation style, it feels like, when you're doodling in a notebook, it feels like you're sketching things out, like if you have to take a quick note. And so I think this style incorporates both that like hypothetical nature of this plan because it differentiates from reality, and it incorporates the kind of quick on the fly, like we're jotting notes of the plan. It helps aid the audience in understanding that this is, something they're mapping out. And it all circles back to the rule of three. You have to explain something to your audience 3 times in order for them to really understand it. And so this plan, this convoluted plan, they explain it when they're putting it together. He's like, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but, I had the potential for this trade. And so when they're piecing together the plan, that's the first time. And then the second time is when we get them putting it all together into this visual medium. And then we get, both the auditory and the visual in this doodle sketch style. We also get to see the plan fully executed. We get to see the plan 3 different times, piecing it together, explaining it, and actually doing it. And so I think that helps the audience grasp the concept of what is going on in this episode. And the like draw my life style conveys the information in a way that is like succinct and clear and is really a clever and creative way to incorporate, like, they're just giving information. This is what we're going to do. But it keeps it entertaining and informative at the same time. And so I think that's really clever, and I think that is really fun. Now, let's move on to lore. We do get some lore in this episode, even though it is crazy and chaotic. And so we first learn that Sarah has other friends, you know, and her friend's name is Maureen. And so I guess this episode passes the Bechdel test, which the Bechdel test isn't everything, but the they specifically give Sarah a named friend, Maureen, and so they talk about something other than a boy. They talk about chaotic. And so it passes that test. Yay, what does that mean? But we get the insight that Sarah has additional friends outside of this immediate friend group. And so this is definitely a healthy dynamic for friendships, but I feel like it's rare to showcase having friends outside of your group on a TV show because, you have your specific cast, and it's not like Maureen is a recurring character. We see her once and then, you know, whatever. But she's like truly this one-off character who solely exists as the exciting incident to give Sarah the information of the trade. And we don't know anything about her except for her face and that she's good enough friends with Sarah to let her know about this opportunity. So that's fun. But the insight that Sarah has friends outside of this friend group, one, it shows us that she has healthy dynamics, and all of these friends aren't confused about who this is. Like, oh, that's Maureen. Of course she's telling us stuff. But it shows you that, you know, this one group isn't consuming her whole life. She has friends and activities that she does outside of what we see on the show. And I think it fleshes her out as a more complex and realistic character instead of like isolating her to this bubble of who she can interact with. Now, let's move on to scanners. I love scanner lore, and we do get scanner lore, and that is that you can set up video voicemail on your scanner. So if you put your scanner on like do not disturb mode, you're not going to accept a call, or maybe you have to decline the call. But you do a little voicemail, you record a little video, and I think that's kind of hilarious. But also, like if I had a scanner, that ringer would never be on. If vibrate's an option, maybe that silent. You know what I mean? It'd be on silent. And so if people try to call me on that scanner, it's going to voicemail every time. You'd have to set up a good voicemail, I think. And Sarah's is fine. I think it's kind of generic, but it gets the job done. And now, another thing about scanners is Sarah says that the reason she goes back to Param to scan the music is because Wama caught the thief, and so she just went back to Param to scan it. And that implies that there was some line of communication between Wama and Sarah, like interdimensionally. Wama, of course, in Param, and Sarah, of course, at Chaotic. And it is possible that, like, Wama found another Chaotic player, and that other Chaotic player informed Sarah back at Chaotic. And that's what I think is most likely to happen. Wama doesn't have access to a scanner, and that is the primary source of communication between characters in this TV show. And so, wrapping it into scanner lore, there's no way for Wama to communicate with Sarah unless there was a scanner involved, unless there was another chaotic player who, like, maybe another chaotic player called her and Wama was there to explain the situation. Maybe he told a person who told a person it was a game of telephone instead of using the actual telephone. But I think that is interesting. And it's something that, it just raises more questions. And of course, there's the answer of, this is one possibility of how this could work within the rules that are set up, is that game of telephone. But it is interesting to think about and explore. Now, this bond between Sarah and Wama, they're close. They plot and scheme, and they use this real life param object of the can opener in order to scam the scammer who has the song of Mandalore music. And I think that shows, Wama and Sarah trust each other, even if they like don't say that they do. They have this kind of banter and back and forth. But really, this interaction, it leads me to the question of you can pour in with param objects, but when you pour out, do those objects disappear? Like when Sarah decided to leave, did that can opener go with her? And part of my instinct is no, like that can opener would still be there. But then what like prevents this world of Param to just be overrun by human objects that like, you could bring things in and maybe that's some sort of economy. I don't know, that's just a question I had. And then my last little piece of lore here is Zombie Troopers 5. And so I think it's interesting that we get insight into the real world on, what are Tom and Kaz interested in outside of Chaotic. And we get this concrete evidence of they're into Zombie Troopers 5. They showed up first in line to see that movie. When Kaz ports back and he tells Tom that his chaotic self knows what he's talking about, they've obviously established some kind of dynamic that, Tom just accepts, like, I'll figure out what you're talking about when my chaotic self comes back. And, Kaz leaves. And Tom goes to see that movie, and so I hope he had a good time. But you have to assume that this is something that happens kind of regularly. If one of them ports back while the other is still a chaotic, their human self is going to have information. And if they're friends in real life, there's going to be these moments when there's gaps in their knowledge, and they have to trust that their chaotic self knows what the human self is talking about. Or maybe they'd fill it in, or maybe they'd be like, what's the point? You're going to have these memories later. But like, what's that dynamic? And I think it shows multiple things. One, that Tom and Kaz trust each other and have developed a shorthand for dealing with this situation. But two, that Kaz's dedication to his friendship, his loyalty to Sarah, like supersedes how much he wants to see Zombie Troopers 5. And they show that he's dedicated to see it. They showed up first in line. And he wants to see this movie really bad, but he likes Sarah more. You know, it just shows the dedication that he has. Now, on to fun facts and other notes. I wrote down we have rats in Curio City. Okay, fun. And then behind Tom and Kaz in line is the girl that Tom was playing with in episode 16. They were having a match with cards and kind of flirting. It's the start of the Tom getting his Maxwell card back arc, but where he's playing with this girl in real life, and Kaz is like, come back to Chaotic. And he's like, no, I'm playing Chaotic here with this girl. So she shows up. And then later, with Tartarecker, he has two girls on his arm, and one of them is that same girl, just with different hair, and the other one is the girl from Kaz's dream in the dream episode, episode 29. It's her with different hair, or maybe they both dyed their hair, but it's interesting that they use the same one-off character like bodies and just change out the hair and like it's a different person. So those are some fun facts. Now, Tank, aka Aggro 999, he's one of these background characters that, kind of show up time and again. And so this is one of the first times we see a background character recur that's not just like a one-off situation. Like, we've seen Sam Shady in the background a couple times, or we've like seen him on the screen as he finishes up a match, but we've really only seen him as a character once. Maybe he has lines in another episode, but here, Aggro 999, he had a full match with Tom, and Tom beat him in a match, and now he came back, and it's that same character. And so I think that's just an interesting through line, and it does help establish that, like, this is a real world, and sometimes in real world you see the same people, you know? And I do think it's interesting that Tank asks Tom, what, you think you're better than me? Because, like, we have seen it in the past, Tom beat him in a match. So the answer there is yes, Tom is the better chaotic player. So that's fun and interesting. My final thoughts on this episode are honestly, I think this is kind of an incredible episode of Chaotic, just in general, because of the pure amount of story that they fit into 22 minutes. This is a fast paced episode, and like, wow, so much happens. But it's also memorable. Like, the intro with the can opener, iconic. It's so iconic that I definitely talked about it like way earlier in another episode when I was talking about like Param objects and human objects in Param. And I just knew, I was like, oh, Sarah has a can opener at some point. Why? Because iconic. It's a great intro. It's a great hook to this episode. Tartarecker, iconic. One, a name, great pun, great name. Two, his strategy, only using Tartarex, so funny. and kind of iconic. He has a brand, and that brand is Tartarek. Tartarekker loves Tartarek, and doesn't that just make sense? And like, sure, he's just kind of this one-off antagonist of the week, but name a more iconic one. You know, Tartarekker, he's that girl. And could I pick him out of a lineup? Probably not. But the way his screen name pairs with his strategy, it's just so good. And like seeing Tartarekker with all of these different battle gear, there's just something about it that like it sticks with you. And also then we get this whole convoluted plot with Sarah trading cards. And so like those are the three things that are really memorable about this episode. The intro, the can opener hook, Tartarekker, and this A plot, Sarah trading cards. I think the trading cards itself is the least memorable part of it, but it's just like this is a fun episode. And for those reasons, I like this episode. Even though it doesn't show Sarah in the best light, I like the opening and I like Tartarekker, and I like that it really keeps your attention. It's fast paced, and the way that they're trading cards. And that's actually the title of this episode, Trading Cards. And it's funny because they are trading cards, like trading cards noun, but then also verb, you are trading cards. And that's what they're doing. They're trading. And it shows how trading is as much in the chaotic culture as going to scan, as porting to param, as buying a pack and uploading them into your online deck. You know what I mean? It shows, it really embodies the trading card culture of being a show about trading cards. And isn't that fun? So that's what I think about this episode. I think it's fun, it's great, and I had a good time. Is it the most deep or profound episode? Not necessarily. Do we walk away with any lessons or like major themes? Not necessarily. But you know what? It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's iconic. So, with that, let me know what you think, and I'll see you later. I'll see you next time. Bye.